Welcome, one and all, to this tutorial on how to build the foreground for your Brickfilms. So, as you see here, I'm showing you, basically it's this little piece of land with a bunch of droids on it. So this is half the video. In the other half, we're going to be talking about not unnatural terrain, so basically man-made structures. So, because they're really two completely different things, because... well, natural terrain like this, as you can see, it's not perfect. It's very wild and unkempt. So I'm going to show you how I go about making terrain like this in the first half of this video. So let's get into that. So, well, how do I start making this? Well, let's take a look at the bottom. So you see I have two of these pieces, which are connected together by... a big square piece right here. You'll see two corners right here. But it's obviously, it doesn't look like that much of a big square because, well, it's covered up by these pieces. So how do I make it look? How do I make it look like it's not just a square? Basically, you have to use a bunch of other pieces. Now, this was relatively easy to do. It's not super big, and I threw this together in about like 30 minutes, something like that. So basically, you have this big square, and of course, I added other pieces on that layer of this square, so the same layer, basically, and then I added another layer on top. So this way, it's, as you can see, it's 3 layers. So it never is larger than 3 layers, right? Actually, maybe this is 4 layers, right? Yeah, 1, 2, 3, 4. So this right here is 4 layers, but that's fine. So how I went about this is, well, how do you make the terrain actually look natural? Well, you see, well, terrain, it is curved. It's not too steep. Of course, there is steep terrain if you want to make that, but this is relatively flat, but it's not perfectly flat. So how I did this was, well, I have 3 layers right here. So the rule of thumb that I generally have for flat terrain is you never want layers that are separate layers that's not directly on top of each other. For example, the bottom one in this layer, they should not be on the edge. So say this piece was right here. I wouldn't like that because instead of seeing, it would look like over here. So you see, oh, whoops. So this piece, it's not horrible looking, but if there's a lot of it, it would look very unnatural. So this one little piece, you see how it's 2 layers. So generally I don't like that in flat terrain. So that's why I made sure that there's always at least 1 stud of space between these 2 layers. And that gives it a much more rounded off natural look, which I think works really well. And then of course, I generally use the same thing over here, of course, except for this. I should probably put a stud right there just to round it off, which would make it look much better. And of course I cut off the terrain right here, so I don't really care about back here because, well, it's for if I were to actually film with this, you wouldn't be seeing this back here, so it doesn't matter. Of course it's really small, so I probably wouldn't be filming with this, but I could expand it and make it bigger so that I could actually use it. So oh yeah, another thing that I'd like to talk about is these little pieces. You see, these are different colored pieces, and you're like, well, why would you have different colors in here? Let's actually just make it look much more natural, because you could have monotone grounds. Sorry, that's my dog barking. I don't know if you can hear that, but you could have monotone ground with just 1 color. But I generally like to have 2 colors at least in my terrain. Of course, if you really want to, and there are certain circumstances where generally you'd want just 1 color. Like, for example, if you have a bunch of snow, there's no gray snow, so you're gonna have it all be white. So the figures and the dwarf spider droid that are being placed here, I posed them. This isn't really important to the terrain, but essentially how they interact with the terrain is oh, well, I had 1 figure that was like this. Now, the annoying thing about droids is that their feet are locked together, so they are a bit limited. However, they also have the potential of having arms like that. So basically, you see his feet is like that because he would be stepping down, and they're all going this way, obviously. So that's my general design philosophy for how to make natural terrain. So how do you make, well, man-made terrain that's obviously not natural and was built by people? So this is what I'm going to use for my example of man-made terrain. It's two sides. So obviously when you're making a Brickfilm foreground, you're gonna want it to be open. Generally, you want to have two walls, which there was a wall here, but I'm using these pieces for something else, which I may or may not decide to show later. But so how I approach this, well, of course, just like regular foregrounds, or just like regular natural ground over there, I have the ground be studs. This is super important. You always want your ground to have studs, because when you're having your figures walk and stuff, there's going to be frames where they're on 1 foot. And if they're on 1 foot, they're not going to be balancing, unless if you, well, actually you could use clay, I guess, for their feet. But it's much, much, much easier to just have studs. That way they can balance on 1 foot, no problem. So studs are super excellent and really help with the figures. So I'd always have my ground covered in studs. So let's talk about the rest of the build besides just the ground. So there's supposed to be a coffee cup here. So basically we have this little desk and a flower pot. On the wall we have a mini shelf. By the way, that used to be a button for like a door, but it's not there now. So we have on the wall, well, we have, first of all, I'd like to point out this blue design, which is just a little pattern on the wall. Generally, you want your walls to be, I mean, maybe like you're making a prison or something and you want your walls to be super boring, like a school or something like that. But oftentimes, walls are more decorative. So I also have this, obviously this is someone's personal office, so I have this Captain America shield and this poster. This poster is not actually Lego, but it does have the Lego like space symbol. So all these little items just make the place look more lively and not dead, and so it looks like someone really lives here. And then of course I have this door, which just going back. Basically you can pull that back, so when you're animating, you like move it a little bit each frame, and it looks like the door's really opening. And of course I had this step. And then on this side is much simpler, but it is a hallway. It's supposed to be a hallway. So over here I have a little like water fill up station, like water fountain. Oh. Oops. So that little thing right there is just, you take your cup and you put it under it and you fill it up with water. And then here's some buttons that you can press to open this door. Or just stand in front of it, I don't know. That should be down. So basically, yeah, this was obviously took a bit more time to make compared to the terrain, which was relatively easy. But you think like, oh, I don't have enough pieces, I'm never gonna make terrain. If you look at how few pieces I used on that, just two of the big ones on the bottom, and then I just had a bunch of regular little like smaller pieces. So honestly, I think if you really think about it and you put effort into it and try to think about making your terrain, you can make some really dang good terrain in a relatively short amount of time with not that many Lego pieces. Obviously, this has way more pieces than that, but it's you don't have to use this many pieces. I mean, generally, a good thing to do is to, well, buy like those just buy pieces off of like Bricklink or something, and you'll have enough pieces to make a foreground. Now, of course, generally backgrounds are actually really, really easy to make, but we're not going to go into that in this video. We'll talk about it in another video. So backgrounds are generally much easier to make because they're further away, so you don't have to use as many pieces, because it'll just be like small little buildings. So this is how I make both natural and unnatural terrain. So I'll see you guys next time, and I'm gonna go let my dog outside because she's going crazy.